as a person who is seeking to renew the institution, what role does the institution play in our understanding of spiritual formation at the social level? Now, I know that's not one of the questions we've talked about beforehand. Normally we talk a little bit about that, but I'm just curious. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, because I've just, sorry to keep referring to this little week-long vacation, but just going to, I think going from the Czech Republic, where I was like thinking about World War II and then communism, and then going to Austria, where I was like unapologetically like going to every Sound of Music pasture that I could. And then reading, I was like, I think I had read it years ago, but I'm rereading the autobiography of Maria von Trapp. And I'm always that sort of generation of those like World War II, like frankly, the few, like shockingly few, disappointingly few Christians, European Christians during the Holocaust who were helpful and heroic. I have just always loved those books and those memoirs. And I've been just meditating on why is it, you talk to some of my Jewish friends in the US and they'll say, most of us sort of know that it was really only the Christians in the Netherlands that, and a few of them at that, who were helpful to us. Everyone else like sold out. And I was, as I've been meditating that on just the last few days, like what was going on in the churches or other perhaps institutions and neighborhoods in the Dutch context specifically that didn't exist in other countries as Hitler was taking over. And there's obviously you have the Confessing Church in Germany. There's a wonderful book that's sort of an unusual biography of Bonhoeffer by a friend of mine named Laura Fabrici, that I highly recommend, called Bonhoeffer's House. And she spent years, her husband was a diplomat in Berlin, and she spent years just being a tour guide at Bonhoeffer's house. So it's less a book about like celebrating all of his public individual heroism and more looking at the quiet fabric of his life, like what was going on in the creedal and church rituals, what was going on in his daily dinner table growing up as a kid, what were the songs, what were his artistic rituals, obviously like even like what did the home indoor and outdoor life look like? And it's sort of like looking at the actual atmosphere and the environment that shapes us and that led to these like, I think someone can be anointed and someone can be called, but there's also these like helpful sociological, atmospheric, formative nudges in our lives that are often institutionally rendered and granted to us. So that's a long wind-up to answer your question, but today, I think to use this, I actually had to look up this word, the counter catechesis. I was like, why are we doing counter catechesis? Don't we just need more catechesis? And I guess Tim Keller used it at some point, and maybe others have. And I guess it means how to do this, how to do like deep formation when all the forces in modernity and in a broader, largely, secular mainstream culture are tempting you in another way. And I would say just a few things. I think historically, like say in the 90s and early 2000s and like the Dobson era, and now I'm going to turn to the US context, like, there's a lot of focus on the right content and the right values and not exposing your kids to certain kind of films and certain kinds of music and so on. Then, of course, a lot of that got channeled into certain kinds of political action. And there were aspects to that, that I'm sympathetic to. But I think the older I get, and I'm not alone here, this is something about the challenges of our particular time, largely because of technology, the pace of life, sort of eroded social fabric, eroded local community life, thin social moral life, all of that is, I think, has accelerated over the last 20 years, us spending way more time on screens than with real flesh and blood people or with the earth. There's something about raising a family that is oriented around shared rituals and time, that is oriented around the creative, and like really compartmentalizing when the devices are out, that is sort of like pushing back against consumerist, passive, withdrawing activities where the home itself models in some ways is like a mini church, like models deep engagement with one another, full presence, creative joy, mischief, humor. And I do think and I'm not trying to idolize the nuclear family here, but I do think there's something profound about literally being born into a mini little world that is highly engaged, humanly speaking, that is a form of counter catechesis insofar as once you've tasted the fine wine of that daily intensity in a household, then so much of a broader, disengaged, cynical, suspicious, solitary, frankly, all the dynamics that wind up leading in the extreme to mass shooters. All of that is seen for the thin gruel that it is. And your appetites are so, I think, exploded as a baby, young child, teenager. And of course, that family interacting and the broader culture, hopefully in ways that are deft and you're not overly sheltering your kids. I mean, all of that is, I'm not the one to give parenting advice here, but I think that it's in some ways it's more about rhythms and atmosphere and sort of wholesomeness early on and deep human engagement that feels like the counter catechesis we need. And I've wondered, I mean, there's obviously homeschooling is exploding right now, largely post-COVID, as and not just amongst people of faith, but I've been very curious, like how will families of faith that because of their faith are creating mini ecologies for kids to not be thrown into the sea of competitive comparison online and all the stuff that happens on social media. Like, how will those kids grow up to perhaps to be the leaders and be better equipped to be the kinds of leaders that the country needs, in ways that even if you're gunning for Harvard, but you grow up in a household that is allowing you free reign online and allowing you to, or they're overly meritocratically pushing you into a million scheduled extracurriculars. I don't know, like there's just, I think we're in an interesting moment where if a family takes like the call of love seriously in child formation, those people may wind up being the ones that we look to in 30 years in a way we're not going to be looking to others who have maybe the pedigreed formation, but not the like deeply loving fleshly formation.